Season 3, Episode 7. This week's topic is Witchcraft, the New Age, and the Occult. We're going to discuss tonight some of the things that are similar and different about these things. So that will be very excited. And obviously, you know, the perspective from Initiatory Witchcraft. I am your host, Brian Cain, and this is my co-host, Levi, Rowland. We are both high priests of the Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft, and this is our weekly podcast. So we'll sort of get into it, and then if you'd like to call in, we'll start taking calls. We'll let you know when we're going to start taking calls, usually within the first 10, 20 minutes of the show. And you can call in with any questions on the subject or on witchcraft or Alexandrian witchcraft. The number to call in is 504-321-3472. We're using a new... God, I look really white. We're using a new... I look like RuPaul. We're using new lighting, and we're using a new thing. So anyway, it's not Restream, it's something else tonight. I don't know what. They didn't tell me they were changing it. So I don't care about that anyway. I wouldn't know how to work it. So we're going to be taking calls in a few minutes. So I was just going to kind of go ahead and give a little bit of my spiel, and then Levi will go into his.
Absolutely.
And then we'll just take it from there. We didn't really have a plan tonight. So I can say for sure that in my journey, my journey in questing for, you know, witchcraft started between the age of 13 and 15, and I had a friend whose mother was a witch, and so there were books around his house, and I was going to elementary school with him. He was my best friend at the time, and that was probably where I started getting introduced to some materials that would lead me to further explore, leading up to me eventually purchasing Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft on my own, which is what really began my journey personally. So, but it had a pre-backstory, you know, I'd read some books, you know, and we'd done some, you know, young teenage rituals together, you know.
Sounds like an amazing, like scandalous novel from the old
days.
Young teenage ritual.
Well, I remember us lighting a fire in his bedroom in a coffee can and dancing around it with brooms and throwing herbs into the fire, but they were just like random kitchen herbs.
Sage, rosemary, thyme. Bring us the dark Lord.
His mother smelled something, so she was like, "What are you all doing up there?" kind of a thing. So, you know, the typical stuff you do when you're a child witch, I guess. So, like, I guess when you're a baby witch.
When you're a child witch.
So anyway, during that time, well, I'm not going to date myself completely.
I was about to say, careful.
Early on, you know, when I first started getting into witchcraft, the New Age movement was extremely popular as well. And so at that time, in most places, that's what you'd have what's called New Age shops. Most places didn't have witchcraft shops early on in the 90s. Later on, some did. Now, places like New York and Salem, Massachusetts, and New Orleans, yes, they did have iconic witchcraft shops that were around early on in the 70s and onwards. But most places had New Age shops, which we now call metaphysical shops.
Yep.
And, you know, that's usually where you went to get your books on witchcraft or whatever subject you were going to get it on. You didn't think of it as
candles.
You didn't think of it as an occult shop. They weren't modeled like occult shops. They all had, you know, books on goddesses. They all had books on witchcraft. They all had books on, you know, different chakras, crystals. They all had crystals, you know, and they still do today.
They still do.
And you know, the people working there. And in fact, that's where I met it was a bookstore called the Open Door Bookstore. And it was run by a woman who was just a semi-well-off woman whose husband gave her what Christian calls a shut-em-up business. It was not profitable, I guess, for many years, but it was the only one we had. And so everyone went there. It didn't matter what you were into, that's where you went. And it was kind of like the church. And I think that still kind of happens today.
It still does.
But there was no other mediums. People weren't getting online for this. You know, you didn't have any other outlook. And this is sort of before the big chain stores got onto it. So eventually you'd be able to go into Hastings and there's a witchcraft section. But at this point in time, you had to go to these stores.
Most people buy their tarot cards at Barnes & Noble now.
Or get a catalog, because you know, people just didn't get online to order things as much, or at least I didn't. So that was your medium. So it was all kind of fused together. So it's like, it wasn't a witchcraft shop. So if you were interested in witchcraft, you know, you'd go over to the little witchcraft section and, you know, that was where I eventually met my first teacher, because there was a woman who worked there, and I said, I'm looking for a witchcraft coven. And she said, well, I might know somebody who might know somebody. And here's her number. And I'll let her know you're going to call. And, you know, it was the somebody, obviously, but she was protecting her in the sense that, you know, I might know somebody who might know somebody. And they, you know, kind of vetting process. This is, you know, things weren't as safe then as they are now.
No, you could have ended up in human trafficking.
Publicly, and she had very small children, so there were a lot of reasons to be careful about it, you know, not wanting to advertise yourself so much. She also worked at the store, but I didn't know it at the time. So, you know, that was the beginning of my journey, but there was a fusion there. And of course, the occult to me was always on the fringe of things, because very early on when I started getting into witchcraft, I simultaneously was reading books on what we now call the work of the magicians, ceremonial magicians. And I was reading those as well. And for a while, you know, I didn't quite mentally separate, you know, to think about it. It was magic. You know, I was interested in magic, I was interested in the occult. But I was going down those two roads, and it's interesting, you know, having later on becoming an Alexandrian witch in our culture of witchcraft, a lot of us often say we are witches and occultists. Like, those two things are stated separately, but it is a common thing that you only really find in the Alexandrian tradition. Not saying there aren't other witches who are also occultists, but as far as like a culture of a tradition, you don't usually hear Gardnerians say, I am a witch and an occultist. You know, they'll just say they're a Gardnerian, you know, witch or Wiccan or whatever they're going to say. It's a culture thing, you know, like for instance, American Gardnerians will often be really comfortable identifying as pagan, whereas like a British Alexandrian is not comfortable usually identifying as a pagan. Some do, because it just depends on when you got brought in, and where you lived, and what it means, you know, because we all know there's different definitions of these things. And what paganism means in the American movement is far removed from what it means in certain other places, you know, because originally it had a connotation of, okay, we're talking about pre-Christian peoples, and it really doesn't mean that anymore, but kind of sidetracking in a sense. We didn't mention
like paganism too.
But it's kind of hard to not get into that as well in this subject, because there's a fusion between all these things, yet they're all separate and in their own boxes. So the first thing I'd have to say is, if I was going to cut it down into my three definitions of the things, the occult, you know, as far as I know, it was sort of introduced as an idea or a concept by Elvis Levi. Probably predates him, but I think he was the one who really sold the word. It's supposed to mean secret or hidden, you know, occultism. And it's a great way for me to describe my workings outside of the craft, because you know, I don't really consider myself to be a part of any other tradition, you know, and the occult is very, you know, it's very widespread, but it's about discovering that knowledge or applying that magical knowledge that exists within Western occultism. You know, it's not necessarily dedicating yourself to a religion per se. Whereas the New Age to me is kind of like a mirror image of that, however, prepackaged for yuppie women in the 90s. You know, and I'm not saying nothing good has come out of it. Absolutely not saying that at all. It's been a gateway drug for a lot of people that led to something else, and I certainly benefited from some things. And I've met some people who were involved who were really cool, and it certainly was a support community for early witches in a lot of cities. Yes. You know, because we didn't have anything else, as I was saying. You know, without that New Age shop and those New Age ladies, there would have been no safe place for me. Witchcraft, however, you know, obviously, as you know, is a religion, and regardless of whether or how you feel about the origin stories in the early revival, the 1950s, 30s to 50s, depending on who you talk to and what source you want to go off of, all of the people who were originally involved with it, who were not necessarily connected to Gerald Gardner. So Gerald Gardner, Alex Sanders, Robert Cochran, Sybil Leek, all of those things. I think somebody's playing with the light. It looks a little better, thank you. I feel like I can see better.
I was about to say, I'm so blinded. If I've seemed out of it for a while, guys, it's literally because I was just like...
Thank you, Val. Yes, I look a little bit more like we've fed now, everyone. We've fed now. Jesus. Anyway, so all the early people approached witchcraft as a religion who were not connected. Sybil Leek, Robert Cochrane, Charles Cordell, Alexanders, Gerald Gardner, all those people who were not all in the same tradition, all approached it that way. So that just simply was the narrative. Most initiates believe that something did in fact occur in the New Forest, and that there was something that predated Gardner in the idea of witchcraft. We don't, necessarily marry ourselves to what that was. Most of us don't necessarily believe it was like an unbroken chain in the literal sense, maybe in the magical sense. That's not really what this topic is about. But my point is that witchcraft has its own identity. However, in the journey, and in the history of it, it has deep roots in the occult, and it has intermingled, and like I said, sort of been carried in certain areas by the New Age, which also has occult roots, right? So it's all separate and it's all fused. In other words, being the chakra lady does not make you a witch or an occultist, right? Being a tarot master doesn't necessarily mean you're in the New Age. Doesn't make you a witch either. However, a witch can be into chakras. Or a witch can be a tarot master, or someone in the New Age can be really good at tarot. So these things can have crossover for sure. So part of it is history, part of it is what community you've been brought in, and then we have to remember that the occult and the New Age are not necessarily religious, right? Whereas witchcraft is, in its living modern sense. Not in the anthropological sense necessarily. So there is the operative witchcraft in the anthropological sense, but we're not having that conversation right now. I can give the same spiel I always do. Levi might fall over because he's heard it so many times.
I'm going to go get a coffee and just let this continue.
I won't do it this time. I won't
the history of modern witchcraft.
I won't do it this time. So that's my spiel is I definitely consider myself an occultist because there are a lot of things in the magical world that predate the witchcraft revival that I think are important. The New Age to me is not it's something I've actually gradually moved away from. I think early on, I had all my crystals because everyone had crystals, and they were in every book, really don't have anything to do with witchcraft other than we like the earth. Big
fan.
Yeah, crystals have nothing to do with the witchcraft revival or what we did. Some folklore has some stone things, but it's just not a big thing. That system comes from somewhere else, right? Same thing with chakras. I'm not a non-believer in chakras, but it has nothing to do with witchcraft in itself, right? So there are independent practices. So I've kind of moved away from some of those. However, the occult world, whereas I have explored chakras, I do believe in them in a sense. They're not a part of my witchcraft practice. I'm more interested in the middle pillar ritual right now. Virtually the same idea. It just has a different root system and one that fits more into my paradigm now. Anyway, Levi, take the floor.
So we titled it about the occult and the New Age, but it's important to delineate what that is. The New Age is not really new. Most of its ideas are repackaged ideas that were from the 18th and from the 19th and early 20th centuries. But the thing that the New Age did differently than the occult tradition, because the occult tradition is very, very old. It's back to Renaissance Europe. It's Marsilio Ficino and Trithemius and Agrippa and all that. But the big one is the New Age brought in Eastern mysticism, right? So that happened really strongly with Blavatsky and Alcott. They brought in Buddhism very intensely. They brought in Hindu concepts, the tattvas, all that. That was a huge difference between the Western occult tradition, which was not heavily influenced by Eastern mysticism, and then the New Age. The New Age loved yoga. The New Age loved chakras. The New Age loved the Akashic records. The New Age loved, Buddhist thought and everything else. That was a big thing that brought it in that was different. It actually caused a big split in a lot of groups. This is why, for example, Rudolf Steiner left Theosophy and founded Anthroposophy, because he believed it was getting too Eastern, right? And it had lost its kernel of truth, its Arthurian, Christian, Western sort of issues or whatever. So that would be one of the big things. And then the New Age also removed any and all barriers. Occultism tended to be historically super elitist, right? It was very, very rigid. It was very like cut off from the masses. It believed in like long waiting periods and ritual purifications. And the New Age came along and sort of removed a lot of that. So I would say that would be the biggest things that broke down the New Age as a separate movement necessarily from the occult, even though it was the same ideas.
It's already happening.
Oh, I know. We are having a few internet issues. We're in the quarter. C'est la vie.
So we'll give it just a second to pause. I didn't think it would happen so quickly. So apparently the internet issues we have at the store are never going to end.
Never.
So I'm just trying to live through it because I don't want to sit in my house anymore. And Christian complains when we do it there because he has to help, which I don't blame him for. He doesn't want to have to do that. So we are, bear with us. This is just a part of living in a third world country, I guess.
No. I mean, New Orleans can be a little rough, but I don't know if it's that far. But yes, also remember, please ask questions in the comments. That's how, that's one of the main reasons we love doing the show. We also would love if you called us in 504-321-3472. It is on the screen. If you're watching us on YouTube, do not forget to like and subscribe to the Hex Education Network. Many, many lovely things there. So,
anyway, so one of the things that, when I think about, what I think about like the crossover between witchcraft and the occult, okay? So obviously you can take certain individuals in like the occult that predate the New Age movement, and you can find these weird moments like McGregor Matthews and his wife, whose name I can never remember. They were both members of the Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
And they formed their own group, which there's not a lot known. It's not very well known, but they formed their own like subcult to ISIS, and they actually had like this belief. It's documented. I've read about it, that they believed that the cult of ISIS was going to be the new religion in the world. Like it was going to be reborn.
It's going to be reborn.
This is pre the witchcraft revival, right? And then, you've got Dian Fortune, who was quite clearly, through her writings, connecting to something with a feminist element that didn't necessarily purely exist in the Golden Dawn. Now, the Golden Dawn was wasn't a religion, but it was connecting to the old gods, particularly the old gods of Egypt. Mm-hmm. But it was connecting to the old gods. And, it's hard to say there, the time frame, because at that point in the occult, the Golden Dawn is considered to be, I would say, like the modern elite school of occultism. They were like your Gryffindor. They were really like the thing.
They were the Gryffindors.
But they absolutely had some Eastern ideas mixed in, obviously, at that point in time. They were studying Blavatsky. They were studying, Hermetic, in a sense. A lot of the practices that we could call Hermetic, you could easily tie to Hinduism or Buddhism.
You could.
Because it's a sort of inner thing. But, if you want to get it, the funny thing about it with these, and I don't know how Levi feels about it, but I think when you look at like the combat that you had at one point in time with people splitting up things because there were too many Eastern ideas, if you were really, truly a historian, you would know that those ideas emerged in the East at one point in time anyway.
Yeah, so the Nestorian church and everything else.
Probably more of a racial stance.
I think it was in many places too.
Especially some British people were very, not appreciative of their Indian counterparts and things like that back then. So, and I think, I kind of went through that in a sense accidentally at one point in time as well, because I thought, that's not craft, that's not this, that's not... what the Vedas did had nothing to do with the occult. Sort of narrow-minded sort of little thoughts that would come up. And I know what I was getting at. I was trying to get at the fact that witchcraft had its own original thing that was born of itself. That doesn't mean it was not greatly influenced.
Agreed.
So the same thing, take the Golden Dawn. It's born of itself, but it was greatly influenced. By the time Aleister Crowley was done with the OTO, I feel like we probably had a different OTO than what he walked into.
Massively.
Because I think it was German in origin, wasn't it? And older than the Golden.
It was older. Oh, it was quite a bit older.
So I think he transformed it quite a lot into his own thing.
And the Saturni, or the Fraternitas Saturni in Germany was the oldest one, actually. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think it's older than even in the OTO. I'm pretty sure it was the oldest occult one kicking in Europe, besides the Masons.
It's not whether... They're apparently working on things down here, but we keep getting told it's going to get better, it's going to get better, it's going to get better, and it just seems to get worse. So I feel like if I just didn't come down here for 2 years, it would still be like this. So my thought process is if I keep coming down here anyway, it sort of forces the issue.
I mean, look at you.
Because I didn't come down here for months, and it's the same as when I left. So,
but the difference for me though is that there are fundamental differences in a lot of these philosophies too. The problem in the beginning, and this has rectified itself a lot, I'll say, is that we didn't have access in the West to a lot of really solid literature in translation.
I don't even know if we're coming through right now.
No, we are.
Can you tell? Oh, okay.
Yeah, about Hinduism and Buddhism. We just
why
didn't.
Are they all saying,
Those are older comments.
Oh, they're older. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry, guys. I didn't know if we were actually being filmed.
So, but we didn't. So a lot of the ideas were, to be perfectly honest, mishandled or misunderstood greatly in the West. Certain concepts of Buddhist Dharma and Hindu Dharma or whatever. That has changed, thankfully, over time now that we have access to amazing translations and stuff like that, and we can actually read the literature and we can have conversations with the philosophers. But in the beginning, that wasn't really the case. And so Blavatsky had a very sort of, in my opinion...
And Witchcraft and the Occult.
Mm-hmm.
So from a seeker's perspective, where would you draw the line? Where do you think that a seeker should draw the line? Because, there's a lot of things going in the mix. Different... someone can work with different spirits, angels, the Fae. And in the past, we have talked about, where those lines are drawn, especially in a monotheistic setting. So if we're approaching the gods through a monotheistic point of view.
Let's look at the New Age, the occult and witchcraft. So there isn't anything that you're going to find in the New Age that's like a problem in witchcraft. Likewise, there's not really anything you're going to find in the occult that's necessarily... There's some things in the occult that might get a little bit more, hokey. If you're going to approach witchcraft, however, as a religion, first of all, it depends on what tradition you're going to get into. So if you're going for Alexandrian, or you're going to Gardnerian, or if you're using one of the other umbrellas, you should educate yourself about that tradition as best you can from the outside. And that might help you navigate what is acceptable or unacceptable to them so that you don't waste your time. But personally, my only recommendations is if you're interested in witchcraft, avoid anything that is taking you down the road of harm. Like I wouldn't necessarily go playing with the Goetia or demons. I wouldn't go start working with cursing people or causing harm or cutting up animals or anything like that, because you're going to run into a roadblock where that's going to taint you for a lot of people. So, and I don't recommend those practices for anyone really, unless you're a farmer or something like that. If you live in a village and you're having a festival, then that's a completely different story than what I'm talking about. The New Age, however, it's practically harmless. If I had any objection to the New Age ever, because it's so much different now than when it first started moving around, and it's not really even a popular word anymore, really, honestly.
No, they repackaged it as wellness, culture, spirituality, et cetera, et cetera.
Now it's Whole Foods.
Exactly. You're not wrong, though.
So I basically think it's pretty much harmless. I think sometimes it's, for instance, we could look at Reiki, for instance. Most people don't realize that Reiki actually does come from an initiatory tradition that is very deeply rooted with people who are actually involved in it. And most people who are practicing Reiki in the West have absolutely nothing in common with that tradition. And they don't know how to teach it. They don't have the initiatory line. Like, it is a thing that existed. I'm not an expert on it, but I know it existed. So there are certain things like that where it's like you don't know that you're getting what you pay for, because trust me, in the New Age, you will pay for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? You ain't going to find no teacher who's going to teach you for free and take you under their wing. It is classes, it is stores, it is the traveling lady to different people's houses. That's what it is. So, and it's not as big as it used to be. But as far as it like doing any detriment, no. It's like usually like chakras, tarot cards, mediumship, it used to be the spiritual movement,
before them.
In the Victorian age, it was ladies doing around tipping tables and stuff like that. It's partially a hobby, and it's, a hobby to people. And I think people run across it. If I was going to say anything, I'd say that the witchcraft of, like the Instagram world, and I'm not saying everyone on Instagram is this, but that sort of imagery of witchcraft reminds me of the New Age, to where it's like,
we've
hey,
returned.
You can buy this. This is something you can purchase. And I run witchcraft stores, so that's not, I'm not anti-purchasing things, but, purchase all you want. It's fun. We like to buy crystals and things. But when it becomes that is the thing, like, look at my statue, look at my crystal, look at my knife. When it becomes that sort of thing, it's not really about anything else, I think, most of the time.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of the same thing with the New Age. It's like, look at my crystals all arranged, or here's me meditating, here's me with my sage. I'm so, I'm so woke, that sort of thing. So it's not, it's not really negative. It doesn't have anything to do with witchcraft. I mean, there was crossover in the sense that Gerald Gardner was, exposed to, he wasn't exposed to the OTO. He was in the OTO on some level. He was a Mason. He was exposed to Rosicrucian things. I mean, he was definitely exposed to what we would call the occult world. Likewise, Doreen Valiente was a huge fan of the Golden Dawn. Alex Sanders was a huge fan of the Magus and the Key of Solomon. So those things are there. They absolutely influence those covens and those peoples and their magical systems. However, the heart of what the religion of witchcraft is, you could remove all of that and it would still be there, because it doesn't require any of those things.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So
You go for
from
it.
from your perspective, as long as the seeker is like focusing on the gods, then everything else is kind of like open range, right?
It helps. I'm going to say something, and I might actually, I'll save a big chunk of this for post this call because I don't want to take up too much of the caller's time. I just want to directly answer you, Alexandra. I think focus on the gods, yes, but also, I mean, if the New Testament can teach us anything, it has a few good bits. Broken clock is right twice a day. By your fruits you shall know them. I mean, honestly, I think it's not, unless if you're a true spiritual seeker and you're looking at a group or you're looking at a practice, it doesn't take that long to realize whether or not the people within it are flourishing, whether or not it actually speaks to your soul. You have to use your instincts a little bit on this, and that's where you draw the lines. You look for the groups where you see people actually devoted to something that has continuation, that continues beyond itself, that has community. That's what you look for. And if you notice that it's fractious and it's just about money and that it's very image-based and there's no depth beyond it, then you know that you should walk away.
Or if it seems like a hobby to them.
Yeah, if it's a hobby, then it's not for you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And just
Awesome.
remember the thing that I'll always say that's been said 1,000 times, the real craft does not cost money.
Yep.
There we go.
But does
Thank
that
you guys
answer?
so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
I've gotten really cold in here all of a
It's
sudden.
very cold in here. So I do want to...
Fallon, make the fan
Fallon,
go away.
come turn...
Make the
please.
fan go away.
I do want to address one thing. I do think the New Age can be not just an annoyance, but an absolutely evil thing in a couple instances. I think that there is a weird contingency right now of New Age people who are basically conspiracy theorists.
It's changed a lot.
It has.
It's going to mean we're going to have 2 shows again.
So sorry, guys. We had a little bit of a crash. It actually was not an internet issue. The program crashed. So sorry, but we're still on. I'm watching us on YouTube, and I can still see your comments coming through. So sorry for that interruption. I'm going to continue.
I'm just hoping it's not going to be 2 things.
I don't think it did because I'm looking at us right here. So what I'll say is this, is I do think that the New Age can get a little evil. I think it can get, it's very anti-science sometimes. It thinks of itself as better, like I'm more educated, go educate yourself. It's like, I'm not going to trust the people I went from high school who are in multi-level marketing schemes selling essential oils, as scientists. So I do think the New Age can be evil in that way. I also think the New Age is evil in one other way, which is the New Age is the perfect religion for late-stage consumerist capitalism to make you a miserable human being.
Are these old, or is it just
No,
not working?
they're coming up now. We're all new. So that's what it is. It's basically like you could not invent a religious movement better for them. We'll make you better. Pretend everything's okay even when it's not. Manifest your positivity. fix your body. And of course, to do that, you need the most expensive foods, the most expensive oils, the most expensive treatments, and we'll sell it all to you. And there's no God, and there's no guilt, there's no punishment, and there's no self-betterment, and you're never going to be corrected because you're always right. And your teachers are going to be super nice because you're paying them.
I am loved because I say I am loved.
And
is that Adina? Is that the chant?
You will never be corrected. You'll never be tested. Your ego will never be challenged. It is the religion of Hollywood. It is a cancerous mentality that exists solely to make money. And so, and that is the difference between the New Age and the occult. The occult never really did that. I mean, honestly, they were patronized, but
you had to have money to begin with.
Yeah, they were usually nobles themselves who were reading Latin, and they had weird hobbies and stuff. The New Age is the commercialization of the occult and basically wrenching all of belief, dedication, requirement, all of that out of it. So, and it's so freeing. It's so freeing. To me, it's not freeing that you have to spend thousands of dollars for a yoga retreat in Bali and do ecotourism to feel like a good person. Like, I don't think that's freeing. That feels like a whole new set of shackles to me. So I do think the new generation is the new generation of New Age is a wolf in sheep's clothing, like very much so.
Well, and I would say in some ways that's happened to certain arenas of witchcraft. So you've got this weird bleed over, and I don't think it's the real craft, but I think that it's, it's trend. It's like the show The Craft becoming an actual conversation in witchcraft circles. Like, I mean, it's fun, but it's a symptom of something in a sense, a symptom of this Hollywood idea, and unfortunately, because a lot of people who are interested don't have access to good books because they don't know they exist, or they just ran into the wrong people, or whatever, they're getting their witchcraft off TikTok, whatever it is. If the first person you run into says, it's all your intention, it's whatever feels right to you,
always,
here's my crystal, let's do a makeup tutorial.
Do you have your credit card on you?
If that resonates with you, then you're going to do it. However, does it have anything to do with actual witchcraft? No, it doesn't. But you're going to run around calling yourself a witch, and people are going to accept that because we are in a society where you're supposed to accept everybody and everything they say, which I think you all clearly know that I do not. I just don't need to have a conversation about it.
No, and Brian is sitting on something very important here. I mean, we're getting to a point where we're getting dangerous, where the New Age is starting to preach that everybody's truth is valid no matter what.
I love how in the beginning of this, you said you were going to be positive.
I'm not going to be positive, I'm sorry. But
you said, I'm going to be kind of positive about the New Age.
Here's the thing. We're getting to the dangerous point now where, like, I mean, are we going to start supporting people's delusions that are hurting them? Like, if people have beliefs that make them anxious, depressed, miserable.
We already do.
What if somebody has obsessive compulsive disorder and they believe that if they don't wash their hands 6 times a day, their mother will die? Are you going to say, live your truth, sweetheart? Like, no, you're going to say, we should probably put you in some exposure therapy. We should challenge this. There are medications that can help you. What we should not do is go, every single thought you have is a beautiful, valid kernel of Mother Earth. But Mother Earth is only a Jungian archetype. No, thank you.
Archetype.
I did want to hit on a comment somebody left. Hector said that wellness culture, that's what they brand it as now, correct? It's not called New Age anymore, has caused a lot lot and it's toxic. 100%
I also think
agree.
it bleeds over to, I think
100%
there's a
agree.
bleed over to some people's definition of witchcraft. So one of the things that I found to be true, and I think this is probably more true of people who feel like their career or their position or their platform requires the approval of the broader community. Okay? Clearly, Christian and I are not of that mindset. We never have been. And we should be the proof that that's true. Do we get some slack for it? Yes, that's why there are some haters, is because they know we think that, they know we're right, and they know they can't do anything about it, so they rail to try to. And the reason I say that is because some people just don't want to deal with that, and I understand that. But in the truest sense of the word, anyone who's successful in these platforms monetarily are not making their money off of the broader community.
No.
They're making their money because they're either good at retail, or they're good at writing books, or they're good at marketing.
They're good at what they do.
Yeah, that's the reason why. Do I think Gerald Gardner made money off of his book? Yeah. Do I think it was a lot? No. Most authors don't make a lot of money off their books, not anymore in particular. So anyone who's writing books right now, I can tell you right now, they could be writing 60 books. They're not making a lot of money off of it.
Oh, we have a call. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, who is this?
Sorry, I'm disoriented. This is Max.
Hi, Max.
Hi. I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, one, I've called in a few times before. It's been a hot minute since I've called in because I've been busy, but, So, I'm a seeker. I really want to be an Alexandrian. Also really want to move to New Orleans. That was the one place I felt accepted in the world. I don't belong in a cornfield. It's kind of awful. But
we'll be the judge of that.
He's mean, don't worry. What's your question?
That had a double meaning.
I think I brought this up with Christine. I had a brief I've had a lot of conversations with Christine on Facebook. I mentioned talking about where I was going with that. Going to Loyola or Tulane in the Garden District for college, and then possibly, if I am accepted, joining a coven. Or if not, that's fine. I'll find another coven. I think you said there's one in Chicago. Well, I'll just find someone somewhere else if I'm not accepted, which is fine. I understand. But would it be unreasonable, I guess, to base a college decision on where I would want to be initiated?
I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, I wouldn't tell someone to do that either. So here's the deal. Okay, so for me personally, because I can only speak for myself, the craft is my number one priority. So I would base all my decisions around that. However, I don't think that's true of most people.
Agreed.
And that's okay. I'm not trying to glorify myself. I might just be mad. That's
it could just be
possibly
illness.
True. Could just be mental illness. So what I would say is, that's a decision only you can make. But anything you're going to do in life, any choice that you make in life is going to have a consequence, and that also, is where you're going to live. When I made the choice to move to New Orleans, I didn't know, how things were going to end up, and I had my own reasons for doing it. It worked out for me. It doesn't work out for everyone. So, you can't really advise someone on that. Nor would I ever tell someone to get initiated. Nor would I ever tell someone where to go to college. So that's a decision you unfortunately have to make all on your own, my friend.
Yeah, and that is how it works. You take the.
I will say, if you want to go to college to become a doctor, you have to go to somewhere that has a good medical school. Same way, if you want to get initiated into witchcraft and trained, you should go somewhere where there is a good coven that could do so. However, I wouldn't move unless I had some sort of relationship with them to begin with.
And it's important to remember
for that reason
that initiation into most traditional groups that are Gardnerian or Alexandrian is not going to be something that is decided through social media. That is where it begins, and that's wonderful. I'm actually glad we have it now.
You might connect.
It's where you connect.
We connected on a thing called Witchcraft.
Yeah, that's how I met.
Doesn't exist anymore.
We've also met initiates through Facebook and things like that. But it's the actual process itself will happen beyond and behind the scenes. So it will not happen in a public forum like this.
No.
Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So our advice as we're not going to talk about initiation on this show the same way we would talk to somebody in private.
I understand.
Yeah, because we're not like Christians. If we were two preachers on this show, we'd be like, well, let's get you saved right now, kiddo. Here's the prayer. Here's what you do. You need to come to church. We're very different than that.
Mm-hmm.
But does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Good.
And my other question, Brian mentioned the witches on TikTok. Leda Diana said the witch talk makes her want to burn her eyes out. I completely understand. Like, how, like,
I'll be honest,
you're
I
in,
don't
like,
know
a
what
store
that is.
setting
I've
with
never
all
watched
these
it.
people
TikTok,
coming
yeah.
in. Like, how do you deal
You
with
guys
that?
are-
Like, I also
I
made
don't.
the comment that
I
I
don't deal
honestly,
with it.
I don't.
Like-
I don't consider them. Here's what I always say.
I know there's a lot of people on YouTube who I feel almost a little bad sometimes. There's this one girl who's really popular, and every time I look at her, I want to set her on fire because I don't think she should exist.
I mean,
And that's
he's a little
wrong.
extreme, but
It's wrong,
It is
but it's
wrong.
true.
It is wrong. But
It's
but
not a personal hatred of her. It's
I
just what
just-
she represents.
the way I deal with it is I don't think of them as having anything to do with what I do. It's kind of like the way that I'm sure a lot of respectable, intelligent Christians feel about the Westboro Baptist Church or feel about, a lot of kooky offshoots of Christianity.
I don't remember her name, to be honest with you.
That's my thing.
I think it's the Witch of Blunderlust is who I'm thinking of.
But
I'm
that's
not sure.
my answer, Max.
oh, God.
I just don't
Yeah.
think of them.
I know who you're talking about.
I just avoid. But
Yeah, like, I have
Yeah.
all these people. Like, of course, I'm still a junior in high school, so I have all these people around me. None of them understand witchcraft the way that I do. They're like, oh, crystals and tarot.
Well,
I-
the
like,
one thing
everyone
we can
keeps
say there
coming to
is
me
they
and
have
be
the
like, oh,
same definition
what
that
crystal should
a
I buy?
lot of people have about witchcraft.
they do. I mean,
Like a lot of people use the anthropological definition of witchcraft, which is where you're taking an English word that has been grafted onto many, many things and applying it as a verb. Whereas the word originally was meant to describe a person, doing something heretical, right?
yeah.
But once again, you've got the church definition, you've got the anthropological definitions. They both historically exist. However, nobody was running around saying they were practicing witchcraft until Gerald Gardner started doing it.
Not as a religion, for sure.
Not as anything that we historically know of. Obviously, Levi and I could pinpoint things that came later that are interesting, where someone might say they were witching something up or they were a witcher man. Or, the word existed in English. So people applied it, but it wasn't usually used to describe magic until much later on. And it's really interesting because I was thinking about this, even in like the 90s, people did not use witchcraft other than in a religious sense. Like it just was not used that way. Like the books, nothing. It's a really new thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're really into labels now. So someone might be like a little bit into a voodoo and a little bit into conjure and a little bit into this one book they read, and they want to call themselves a witch. So anything that says, well, witchcraft is its own thing, says they can't use it anymore. So that's where the combat comes in, right? So if everyone in the world believed that witchcraft was a religion that emerged in the UK in the 1950s, what I find very interesting, this will be a little sidetracked. I was just saying to Christian the other day, the OTO doesn't have to explain that at one point somebody made it up. The Golden Dawn doesn't have to explain that at some point somebody founded it. Witchcraft does, because it has this huge history that pre-exists, Gardner using the name. However, there's no proof that anyone actually ever practiced it before Gerald Gardner. That's not what I'm saying in the sense I'm not saying I don't believe that people did, but there's no proof. There are trial records of people who were arrested and killed for doing so, but there's still no proof. A lot of people think that was all hysteria, right? So what we can say for certain is that there was no such thing as a witch until there was a modern English language. So
Not as we understand it, not until Christendom. But yeah, your friends aren't going to agree because they're on social media, and that's what witchcraft is on social media. But if you want it to be more, then it'll be more for you. I mean, I'm going to go and tell you a secret that's not to cut you off, but I want to tell you something that's really important to realize when you're young. This is not just about you in this particular moment. This is true of all organizations. I promise you the vast majority of butts in the seats at the local Lutheran church don't give a shit about Jesus. They just don't. They do not care. The majority of Buddhists in East Asia are Buddhist because they were born Buddhist. They don't give a shit about karma or about the deep philosophy of Paticca Samuppada or whatever. They do not care. It's all cultural. It does not matter. True believers are rare regardless of what religion we're talking about. So if you feel lonesome in it, just remember that is that if you're a seeker, or you're a spiritual person, or you really truly believe it, you are going to be out on a branch by yourself sometimes, because the vast majority of the world is just not interested. They're secular, they're very interested in their day-to-day lives, and they live and die by money and by modern capitalism. They don't really care about anything else. And that's true of all religions.
I've gotten very into the goddess Isis. And
I'm not laughing at you. I was laughing at
my
someone's
general
comment.
insanity, kind of, like, when I stopped trying to hide the fact that I'm a witch. Pretty much everyone at my school knows. I don't really care anymore. But everyone just thinks I'm kind of insane because I'm constantly talking about Isis.
Well, they don't.
Because,
the thing is that's just. I mean, honestly, that's just because of it's different. You're obviously in a place that's very Christian, I'm guessing. But I mean, down here.
Oh yes.
Down
the
here,
MAGA hat wearers. My God.
Yeah, down here you wouldn't even be that special. Like, I mean, like down here you'd be the normal one in the room. The person next to you would be like ISIS. My God, okay, white lighter. Like, I mean, like in New Orleans, nobody even care. But I also want to give you one bit of advice before I let you go, and it's very important advice. I grew up in Appalachia. You don't get more Christian.
You're not sick, are you?
Than where I came from. No. Than where I came from.
Levi gives me COVID. I want you guys to
Never.
me.
You do not get more Christian than where I came from. Be very careful. Be very careful that you do not decide to define your religious experience in opposition to what you're experiencing now. And what I mean by that is something very specific. There are a lot of pagans that I know in their 30s and 40s who are who are basically stuck in high school. They never moved past it, and they never ever could let it go. And so they're the constantly wounded, they're the constantly broken, they're always unhappy, somebody's always out to get them, they're eternal martyrs, they can't make progress. Be very leery. It is an easy trap to fall into when you are the weird kid in high school. We all were. The best way to escape that, honestly, is to just frickin' escape it. And then do not let it become your identity. The minute it becomes your identity, you're doing exactly what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you for calling Dr. Phil's show.
I know. Levi just gave some deep advice, but keep the faith, Max, okay?
Thanks for calling.
Bye.
Sorry, everyone. My earbuds that I'm using tonight are like a little new and not fitting quite right. So I'm having to play with them a little bit.
But I think that's what makes a lot of like those people who are constantly attacking you and for they're eternal victims. You know what I mean?
Somebody used that metaphor. Funny enough, they said that a lot of these people were acting out their fantasy of being the bully.
They are. They're oppressed people who want to be the oppressor now.
I very rarely notice people attacking me. What gets me is occasionally I'll get these people messaging me. So I'll give you a little story right now. This kind of goes along with the topic. Someone will message me. And I don't always respond. I do not always respond either because I don't have time or because it's weird or, just that random hi from some guy you just added, don't usually respond. However, occasionally I'll get like what I like to call like someone who's like pretending they don't know who I am. And then they ask me a loaded question.
Yeah, that's popular.
And I'm like, and this sometimes happens in private. Sometimes it happens on public forums. And I think, okay, I know what you're doing. Why am I walking into this? And I usually don't, but once in a while I do. And, it's kind of all about people's personal identities and their insecurities, and that's what it comes down to. They're so afraid that I'm going to think that witchcraft is a religion and that you have to be initiated into it, because if I think that, then I think they're not real. Why do you care what I think?
It's true.
If you have a completely different ideology than me, then you're not doing what I'm doing anyway.
So why does it matter? So
if we're both using the word witch, but you're doing something completely different from what I'm doing, our streams just don't need to cross, and that's how I feel about it. So unfortunately, because there's this constant forced vacuum of the community, let me tell you something. You know what the community is for? To make money off of you.
Exactly. That's the New Age in a nutshell.
The pagan community, just like the New Age community, is to make money off of you. Let's put you all into one place so we can advertise our festivals to you, so we can advertise our stores to you. I didn't come up with the idea, nor did Christian, but that's what I see it as, because it serves no other purpose. Because you aren't doing anything in those groups except complaining about people. Sometimes people I don't like, so it's not always, not always something that's like, a problem. But, it's, I don't pay attention to them. I'm not in any groups other than the ones that we run because I just don't like them.
Yeah.
And
you all made your own festivals.
If you're in a type of witchcraft that's a completely different ideology than mine and I don't agree with it, I just don't want to associate with it. It's not like I hate it or I want you to die or I think you should stop doing it. I don't care. I'm not interested. To me, witchcraft is my religion and a priesthood of the goddess. It's in a sense a rebirth of the mystery tradition. It's a cult. How it relates to the New Age is commercialism.
Yeah.
How it relates to occultism is history. Because I think witchcraft is a Western occult tradition, but it's also a religion. So that's the crossover there. Some Western occult traditions are kind of religions, like in a sense, Thelema, is born out of occultism.
Thelema is a religion,
but it's a religion.
The OTO is not. Thelema is a religion.
They don't always. It's complicated, but
the Acrolian is very.
The Golden Dawn's technically not a religion.
No, it's an order.
They have philosophies and gods. But
so is like the builders of the Adytum and all that, Boda.
I'm sure there are other ones we're not thinking of. I guess modern druids could be considered a weird crossover.
Yeah, some of them are not religious.
Yeah, some of them are and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I will also say, my partner and I have a lot of talks about the New Age because we have mutual friends and whatnot who are very into it or we know people who are really into it. I actually believe, I actually very deeply believe that the New Age is getting to a place where it is no longer inane or cutesy, and it's actually dangerous. Like, I think it's psychologically unhealthy. I think it has imbibed really horrible beliefs about how the brain works. I know people who have gone so far, they're like, you have to manifest your power and manifest your destiny, and if you think good thoughts, the universe will give you good things. And I'm like, okay, well, what about people in the Congo? Like, the reason they're poor is because, the CIA assassinated Patrice Lumumba, initiated a civil war that killed 1 million people, and then we staged a coup. Like, that's why they're poor. It's not because they didn't think hard enough or they didn't align themselves to the right vibration. And that is rooted in some creepy, racist BS from history. One of the things that needs to be completely gutted from the New Age occult authors, from Blavatsky to Dion Fortune herself, the great white light that everybody thinks was perfect, homegirl wasn't, is this idea of the root races and the superiority of the European intellect. This is toxic, and it's racist nonsense, and it's used to do a lot of nasty stuff. So the New Age is not sweet and innocent all the time. And like Brian has said, it comes off that way, though.
The reason
it sells itself that way.
The reason it started getting called the New Age was because it was a nickname on the Age of Aquarius.
Yeah, it was the Age of Aquarius, the rebirth of humanity.
So it didn't start out being what it became or what it is now. It started out, I think it started out with hippies.
Oh yeah, the flower power and all that.
But it just eventually, which in some ways is witchcraft. But there were a lot of hippies early on in the 60s and 70s. It's become something else. I think now the New Age is very separated from the occult and witchcraft, except for the commercialism and the mindset of it, I think, has bled over to witchcraft. I will say that has not happened to the occult, and I don't think it ever will.
No, agreed. I actually think the occult has said it's funny because the occult seems on the surface more elitist, more snobbish, I actually think it's deeper.
Oh, you're here.
Much more honest and much more caring, actually, and much better for your mental health. I think if you went down the road of studying Marsilio Ficino or Agrippa, you're going to end up in a better psychological place than if you follow these New Age hippies in California. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, guys. These movements always produce psychotic gurus. They have a history of toxic leadership, massive monetary fraud, and psychological unwellness. If I, you know, I mean, like,
I'm going to be very positive about the new age.
it's like
This
forced
is what he
positivity.
tells me. This is what he tells me. before
I
the
failed.
show.
Forced positivity is the marker of a fascist.
Something took over.
I mean, it literally is,
some
though.
spirit entered his body and took over.
Tell me I'm wrong, though. What is more fascist than smile, everything's okay, even when it's not? Smile, just smile. Don't be unhappy. Don't be negative. That's really convenient for leaders who want to make sure that you don't rebel. You know, like, I mean, it's a wonderful tool for like a really crappy life.
Well, I think
And it's not witchcraft. It's not witchcraft.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a religion. It's not even a thing. You know, the New Age is it goes along with the idea of spirituality. You know, and that got really popular for a while. People like to say, "Oh, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I'm religious."
Me too.
I hate the word spiritual. You know,
I'm not a big fan.
I'm not like against it. I just don't like it for myself.
I don't like how it's been used. I hope it's the devil.
It's
and
kind
he's
of
just
like
calling
saying,
in. And when I answer, he just goes,
holy.
"Good job, guys."
I'm holy. You know, that's what it reminds me of.
Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Oh, hey, it's Stephen. How's it going?
Hi, Stephen from Australia. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
Doing well.
Cool. So, yeah, I've got 3 questions. The first one is related to, I don't know if you know the Craft movie that came out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it. Yeah, so, look, I was just wondering what your thoughts are about that, because I've always wanted... I mean, my desire has always been for someone to actually make a movie about real witchcraft, like as it affects real people in the real world. But, I mean, this has never happened, I don't think. So what are your thoughts about that?
I don't think you can... I'll let Brian answer too, of course, but the way that we practice witchcraft, there couldn't be a movie about it.
Yeah.
There has been documentaries.
But I mean about the actual practice itself.
Like, you could make it a fictional movie, really.
Yeah, but
I mean,
saying...
maybe someday there'll be, like, a life movie about somebody, but, you know, I mean...
It'd be really hard to be honest, because some of the things we keep secret, some of the things that we prefer to be done only in the confines of the circle, stuff like that. So it'd be really hard.
Yeah.
As far as what I thought about the movie, you know, outside of the fact that I don't think it should be a real conversation happening with real witches, you know, that's one mindset I have. Other than for fun, I get it, but I think it's very weird because it's not. I thought it was horrible. I hated the movie.
He's got opinions.
Same.
It's like they took Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and tried to fit it in with the Craft. It really didn't even have the same vibe. It was horribly done. And they threw things in there that were just like so cliche that I was just like, oh, really? You had to do that?
I'm the water witch.
You know,
okay, girl.
It was dumb.
God.
I hated it.
Girl.
The best part of it was having Nancy in the end. Like, you should have had her in the whole thing. Trying to kill
I hope
those.
she should
have got out and tried to kill those stupid kids. Then it would have been a movie.
I hope she did well. What's your second question, Stephen?
Yes. So my second question pertains to the topics of astrology and its cross-correlation with the New Age. And I guess this is more pushed towards Levi's upcoming book, which I'm dying to read.
That's actually going to be our next show.
Yeah, it is.
It's going to be our next show, so save a question on that because it's going to be our entire next topic.
Yeah, we're doing a whole show on astrology.
I haven't announced yet, but our next show is going to be all about Levi's book.
Yay.
Perfect. All right, excellent. I will save that question then. Okay, so my third question then is probably a bit more of a complicated one, but I guess it relates to the balance of old and new in magical practice. So I have a real respect for, you know, the Neoplatonists, the grimoires, a lot of the older magical traditions. But at the same time, though, I mean, you know, we are living in the 21st century. We can't leave our brains at the door. We have to accept that, you know, that science exists and that we are living in a world of technology. But I guess in terms of traditional witchcraft practice, how would an Alexandrian coven balance that? Because there seem to be a lot of very old traditions mixed in with your practice in the modern world. So I guess how would you balance that?
I mean, we still do things like, I mean, we're on YouTube right now. We have Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts and things like that. So
we're on this.
Yeah, we're doing a show online. You know, when I have a question, I don't write to Brian in Dove's Blood ink on parchment paper. I call him on the phone. I mean, maybe I want to write to him with Dove's Blood ink on parchment and it'd be very aesthetically pleasing, but And also, I think we recognize that the way we communicate things about things is going to be a little different, and the way we do things might change. But the core beliefs, no. I mean,
as far as our actual practices, we to the best of our knowledge, we are doing our best to do things the way they've always been done.
Yes. Maybe I'll give a specific example. Like I've heard of some people, for example, sending a spell through an email or through an SMS or something.
Yeah, we don't do things like that.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
No, we don't do things like that.
Okay, all right.
And one of the reasons that I don't is because I also wouldn't have sent a spell through a boring letter in the 18th century either. Like, just because it's new doesn't mean that it's like, that's, like we use communication like text messages flippantly in the modern world. So why would it be a place where I would want to put power? You know what I mean? Just because it's common does not mean it's power. I wouldn't have done it. Would a spell have been any more powerful in the old days if you'd have sent it through a telegram? I mean, just, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's more about the intent anyway than the methodology.
Yes. Fair enough.
But yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I can't think of anything else. I'm getting a brain fog, so
you're fine.
I will let you go.
You did have 3 questions, and we made you save one of them.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. See you next time. Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much for calling.
No worries. Bye-bye.
So
I was just going to announce. So I was going to do it at the end, but so I don't forget. So Levi's book, The Art Cosmic, is available for pre-order at hexwitch.com and salemomen.com now. So you can pre-order it now. It will be the subject of our next show.
Absolutely. But signed copies are available for pre-order. The Art Cosmic, Magic of Traditional Astrology. I think one of the things when Brian and I were talking about the show, and I was thinking about it a little bit in my mind, I was thinking, is the occult and the New Age, like, has it become so kind of like watered down at this point that there's no redeeming it? Oh, so not Salem Omen, yeah.
Omen Salem.
Or maybe just on Hexwitch, actually. I worry sometimes that, like, you and I it's hard to communicate sometimes these beliefs because we're literally speaking such a different language at this point. Like, it's been so divorced from the mainstream.
Well, I think most of our listeners who have been listening frequently have a clue, I really
100%.
do. Whether it's because of their practices or because they're interested in it. So, and I think that a lot of people who follow us or the seekers that I have met within the last few years, you guys have a clue. Like, I do think you do. I think most of you probably practice the religion of witchcraft.
Agreed.
So, what we're saying is that, in our temple, in our coven, we are working, the teachings of Maxine and Alexander's, and their predecessors, and the people that followed them and passed it on to us, And so we are doing things in a tradition the way that they've always been done by our elders. Nothing changes. We don't want it to change. So in our magical circle, we're working the same magical circle. So time, somebody said that to me recently. Well, things change, not in a tradition, not really. It'd be like, it can, obviously, like you've got people who, you could take the Catholic Church as an example. They took Latin out of some of the Mass. Was that a good idea? Well,
Depends. I've been to some really crappy Novus Ordo Masses.
It is what it is. But, within witchcraft tradition, within Gardnerian and Alexandrian tradition, there are new
textiles.
There are new creations that come up. It's not like we're stuck in a box necessarily. So new creations come up, but you can add to it, but you don't take away. So things are kept and preserved. And when you train into those traditions, that's what you're hoping for. You're generally not hoping to learn from that person their own brand of witchcraft. You're looking to learn the tradition, and you're hoping they're passing the tradition on to you correctly. When you decide you want to, become a member of the Golden Dawn, you're going to be very disappointed if you find out Fred taught you his own system of magic that had very little in common with the Golden Dawn. This does happen to people.
Frequently.
But it's really not the mission statement, right? So
mission.
Yeah.
Can I also say one thing here about this? That there's been a couple comments that have joked about this, and I'm sure Christian in the comments here can agree with me, and I bet he will, and I know you will. I think the New Age are so full of it when it comes to love and light. Like, they are some of the most vicious people when you disagree with them.
Yuppie women from
oh my
the
God.
Midwest.
They're
Come
privileged
on,
because most of the New Age are privileged white people.
Yes.
Let's just be honest here. Most of them are privileged.
They were able to afford
white
that
people.
trip to India.
And so they do not tolerate disagreement. They do not. They're very group thinky. They will absolutely eviscerate anyone who challenges their happy little bubble that they live in. Like, Christian can attest to this. Brian can attest to this. Like, you want to talk about the meanest people?
Well, I do have to confess that I live on Mount Olympus, so I don't see these people very often.
But they're a hateful lot.
I have to be invoked in a ritual before I notice what's going on.
They are a hateful lot.
What was that last part?
The love and lighters are the meanest people on earth.
Oh.
It's true, though. They really are. I mean, like, and I often find, and I hope I'm not, like, being too mean here, but I often find that I find it in weak people who really
knows I don't like that word. Don't use that word on my show.
But people who never found a good sense of self, and so they found it in a guru, or they found it in a love and light process or whatever, and it's a delusion, basically, that lets them get through their terrible life. And the reason they're so hateful is because they can't have it be shattered, because then the whole thing would tear down and they'd find out they're just a 40-year-old sad, useless alcoholic who sells essential oils.
Doesn't love them anymore.
And there's nowhere to go. Like, and they've been frauded.
We're not like down.
They've been sold something.
I think Levi and I have and probably Christian too, like, there's a different generation of experiences here. Like the, what are you guys calling it now? This wellness culture.
Yeah, wellness culture, spirituality.
I have no knowledge or connection of this. Okay, like, whatever they're talking about means nothing to me, and it's probably because those kinds of people are people that I avoid. Like, I don't know what it is. Likewise, Levi probably isn't connected to, the goddess movement that I was subjected to in my early teens, which was extremely New Age. It doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. But it wasn't Z Budapest. It's not what I'm talking about.
No, she's a radical.
It was its own thing. They had what they called moon lodges, and it was a completely different thing, and it was all these different people. But so my experiences are a little different, but I think that there's bleed over in it. It's the evolution of spiritual commercialism, and the very idea of the word spiritual. When you say I am spiritual, it is actually an extremely egotistical affirmation. Like, I'm spiritual. If you were to translate that in most contexts, if you were to go to India and translate that to I'm spiritual, you'd be practically telling someone you were a guru.
Yeah, like I'm the faithful.
It comes through me. I'm spiritual. And I certainly, if I was going to say that man's very spiritual or that woman's very spiritual, it would be, that's what I would be saying.
Like they're the conduit for spirit.
Yes, it's an actual thing. So when you say it of yourself, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. It's like saying, I don't go to church, I'm a saint. And I think it's, it's just a strange way of thinking. I'm religious because, I'm not always spiritual.
I need God's forgiveness a lot.
Sometimes I need to be set right.
But honestly, it is different. Christian, Brian, we probably do have different experiences. Because for me,
when Christian first got into the New Age, they were still digging the crystals.
That's true. That's true.
You could go dig up your own crystal.
For me,
what did you say?
Special. For me, the New Age, I didn't grow up. Brian's right. I didn't grow up in I was born in 1988, so like the 90s was not when I was forming.
I'm taking
those
it.
ideas.
All that comes to my mind, and I may be taking this weird. But those people, I'm so woke. I don't.
But even that's gone.
Is that a part of them?
They don't say that anymore.
Oh, okay.
You're a couple years back.
I hated it. No, you're not.
Spiritual. That's what I said. Spiritual.
Oh, I see.
He's spelling it funny. But like for me, the wellness culture to me has been sold in a very different way than it was sold to Brian in the 90s. In the 90s, it was sold, like he said, the goddess movement, where you beat the drums and there's a circle somewhere in a public park and there's a long-haired gray woman who tells you how to find yourself, right? That's not now. Like now it's I wear $400 yoga pants. I am obsessively spiritual. I journal 4 hours a day because I'm better than you. I go to Soul Cycle. It's competitive. It's all white. First of all, it's all white, top down. And it's young too. No more old people. Those have all been kicked out. No more gray-haired ladies talking about their spiritual experiences. It's all young white people. And they all need your money. And they all have more money than you to begin with. And
all I can think of is, I knew Charlie Manson when his name was God.
But like, honestly, that's how it was sold to me, and that's why I find it feels so revolting. And the one thing that they all operate on, the entire New Age movement operates on one thing. You're broken, but we can fix you. You're too fat, you're too sad, you're too unhappy, you're miserable, but don't worry, we have all the ways to fix you. And that's creepy. That's how you end up like destroying someone. It's not a good look, children. Like, sorry, I'm catching up on comments. That was that awkward silence. But yeah, if you like the spiritual label, sure. But I actually love what Brian just said because I've never thought of it that way. But that's 100% true. It's what when you're saying I'm above the religion, I'm with spirit. It's like,
no, you're not.
Oh wow, okay, like impressive. Like
I also take it as translating that I'm not committed.
Oh yeah, it's 100%. I'm
really
spiritual, not religious.
It's like, well, we're seeing each other, like, and the love is real, but
it's like
we don't like labels.
The spiritual but not religious people are like, God and I are just like chatting right now. Like he sent me some pictures. I haven't decided yet. Like, I don't want him to meet my mom. And it's just like, no, I'm not here for that. Like, I want to.
Now the occult world, I think it still attracts. Well, it attracts, there are some people who get attracted to it because of the ooky spooky a little bit, but for the most part, I still think it attracts the intellectual. And, that as a witch, that would be like the downside of a lot of occultists, as we call them armchair sorcerers. They can be very smart, but not effective.
Agreed.
You can know a lot about a lot of things and not know how, and not apply them, You could study painting for years without ever having painted something. So it's just one of those things. So it's, and that's coming from witches' perspective. We're witches first. Labels are a thing, and they do have meaning. Someone was saying labels have meaning. Yes, they do. And those meanings evolve within the social construct of the conversations that we are having, not the main pop stream world, because they're slower to catch up and not as interested. Like to the most of the world, neo-pagan will never mean anything. Will ever mean anything. It's a word that's only going to exist in this small little bubble, and it's been accepted by some people and rejected by others. I've used it as a way of having a conversation with somebody that knows what it means. I'm not married to it, but it exists within a certain vocabulary that's been created in a subculture. So that's kind of what we're dealing with all these things. And I think that one of the things I constantly am pointing out to people is that somebody who is in a new age thing in this community is expected to be put on the same page as somebody in the Golden Dawn, and they're just not. And you can't expect these people to have a conversation and say, well, you're in the same language. And I'm going to rip something off Levi says to translate as treason. I think that applies to the broader magical community. You cannot expect an initiate of witchcraft to have a conversation with somebody who says witchcraft is not a religion, it's their practice, they light candles, that's what it is. You can't expect these two people to have a conversation without translation, and it won't really translate.
Yes.
Because it's all going to be taken into an emotional context.
But this is where the difference of experience comes in, because the kind of new age Brian is talking about and was exposed to is not as popular now. The whole concept of like, it's all crystals, and that's still popular. That's not what I'm saying. It's all over Instagram. What I'm saying is ideologically, they're very different. The new agers in the park that he's talking about believed in the goddess.
Well, some of them.
In their moon lodges. Starhawk believed in the goddess.
Yeah.
Believes in the goddess, regardless of whether we agree with her. Z Budapest, whatever, they believe in the goddess.
Yeah, the people I knew really thought angels were talking to them.
The modern New Age is godless. The modern New Age doesn't believe anything but you. And they don't believe in real magic either. They don't believe in any of it.
Do I use candles? Light the wick.
So the New Age has eviscerated all of that. They don't believe in any of it.
I can't make fun of candles anymore because a friend of mine wrote a book about candles, and it's really ruining it for me because I've been making fun of candle magic now for years. And it's not that I'm really anti-candle magic. It's just such a good example of a cliche. You know, a friend of mine posted. Well, it's not really a friend of mine. Someone I knew posted. Now I'm not going to tell the story because I said something I don't want to say.
Yeah, let's not.
I've got to banish it now.
We do. We've got to
remove it from the law. All right.
You know, but the modern New Age, and here's the other thing, is the New Age is responsible for creating the ookie spookies too, because they're a reaction against that. The trad witches with their dead frogs, desiccated dead frogs hanging on crucifixes and shit in the house, those are the reaction against the 90s Love and Light crowd. And now they're reigning supreme on a lot of social media things. So it's a pendulum, and they've swung it so far that, you know, at one point you had to be at the Moon Lodge with your long gray hair and talking about, drumming to shamanic spirit trance crystal
with
meditation.
With your spirit animals,
which was all cultural appropriation.
Oh, the whole thing was.
The whole thing was.
Which I'm not on that bandwagon, as you all are aware. Hey.
And then the modern version of that, to go so far away from that, has been, I'm in the, in the graveyard with the bones, and I'm creepier than you, and I touch more blood, and I drink, whatever. It's like people, like, the whole point of this is to experience God and to draw down power and make magic. That's what we do. Like, I worship the gods so that I can have that power in my life to change things. And I call that magic. If you don't want to do that, don't be a witch. Like, go do something else. I want to draw down the power of divine worship, serve at that altar, and have that co-creative relationship with the divine. So that's witchcraft.
If you want to buy your witchcraft or buy your occultism, and that's it for you. It's imagery, it's eyeliner, it's whatever it is. You don't have to study it. You can pick it and choose as you like. That kind of is all a product of the New Age. Occultism, intense study. I'd say that would have to be the
experience. And you got to be drawing those circles.
Sometimes.
Doing those things.
I don't think occultists always are. As experienced. I mean, they should
be, though.
They should be, yes.
They should be.
Witchcraft is a religion. So whether or not you choose to be initiated or not, that's not the conversation we're having here today. Likewise, in the occult, same thing. There are initiations within the occult.
Initiatory lodges, yeah.
Probably New Age initiations of some kind somewhere by Papa Big Spirit, the white man Native American
from Oklahoma. I learned my magical ways in Newburyport, Massachusetts. It's like,
my grandmother was a Choctaw Indian.
No, she wasn't. Your grandma worked at a muffler shop in Camden.
Bless the maple syrup.
And we all know that now because of Ancestry.com and the internet. And you need to stop lying.
Well, there is that. So yeah, I don't know how much you guys are all faced with this, but we thought it was kind of an important conversation. Now, one of the things we were going to say is, like, what do we have in common? What we have in common, I think, between these three different fields is that in each one, there's some desire for personal transformation.
Yes.
If you're applying it, right? That's cool. It's magic, really, isn't it? That's the desired goal. Not everyone's good at it, and not everyone ever gets there, but there is that common interest, and I think that's it, really.
No, there is another big one.
What's the other big one?
We do share a common language many times. For example, what I mean by that is the occult, we do use certain ritual structures and certain components of rituals, purifications, exorcisms, things like that we do share with the occult world, and that, somebody in an occult order would find very comfortable, I'm guessing, if they were to step into our circles. Likewise.
You sound sick. Do you have allergies?
No.
He used to come to Circle Sick and
he didn't.
Lie about it.
He didn't. I never have. He lies on me.
I have to worry because he's a teacher, so he's around all these dirty creatures.
No, we're virtual now.
Oh, yeah, you have been.
I've been testing kids, though, but very strict about how we do it. It's insane. It's so much work. But, no, we do
in
share.
Groups or singly? How do you do it? Like, you have to go in?
It's a very small group and all isolated.
Oh, okay.
It's very isolated. We're very careful. But no, we do share a somewhat. Here's the thing. I tried so hard. It's almost like a spirit did come over me. I'm not. Brian's not kidding. Before the show,
in the very beginning,
I was like, I've been so mean about the New Age in episodes of Covendom and in my private life. I need to say some nice things. And for some reason, the Spirit of the Lord came on me tonight to tell you, let my people go, get the hell out of our children. She is the whore of Babylon. I don't know why, but
see, and I do think that there's a common language between many occultists and witches, especially Alexandrian witches. Not sure we share a language with the New Age, really. I think that we do at times, but I don't know.
Here's what I'll say also. We used to share, my phone just alerted me that Venus is passing Saturn in the pre-dawn sky tomorrow.
That was a warning.
God help us. I will say this. We used to share a lot with the New Age. When the New Age was born, it wasn't all bad. And honestly, Gerald Gardner was influenced by the New Age. He was. I'm sorry, but I mean, he was. He was what was around him at the time. He was a gymnosophist, which was an early form of spiritual.
I don't think they called it the New Age then.
They called it. I mean, they called it theosophy usually.
It would have been classified as occultism.
But he was into gymnosophy. No, they didn't know. They were trying to break away from that stuffy occultism.
Yeah, but it still would have been classified that at the time.
But they used a lot of weird, newer terms for it, and they were into oral.
Levi's going to the roots of how it was born.
But what I was getting to, and I think you'll agree with this. The New Age left us, though.
Yes.
In the early stages, they had good ideas and we were interested in it.
May have partially been pushed away as well.
Agreed. And that's what really happened. In the beginning, when they were just talking about psychic shielding, astral travel, the third eye, the Akashic Records, I believe in all of this, really. I kind of even, I don't believe in spirit guides, but I believe in everything.
I do.
I believe in a lot of Akashic things, and I believe in the sort of tapping into that, and I believe in the astral shell and all that. That's fine, but the New Age,
we wouldn't call them spirit guides.
No, the New Age left all that, so I don't think it's us that left them so much as they got pushed out because they went a little cuckoo.
Levi's higher self hates things.
He does. My higher self. I need a T-shirt that just says "My higher self hates you." Your rituals are tacky, and I hate you. I also want to answer, Hermit Mode said something that's very important, the concept of spiritual bypassing. Yes, this is a real thing that a lot of psychologists have talked about. Spiritual bypassing, in case you don't know, is a term that was invented. It was invented by a psychotherapist in the United States, I believe, who was also a devout Buddhist. Convert, obviously, Western convert, I believe.
A way to avoid reality.
Yes, and not only that, but a way to not engage in things that you need to engage for your mental health. So the New Age is very guilty of this, where it will say, they'll post pictures online of a forest and then of a bunch of pills, the clue being that they're antidepressants. This is a real antidepressant. This isn't. That's a terrible thing to post. And if you post stuff like that, you're a terrible person, period. Those medications save people's lives. So if you are one of those people, that's spiritual bypassing. Don't go to a therapist, just go to a lake. Yeah, maybe they'll go to that lake to drown themselves. So shall we not? Spiritual bypassing is absolutely toxic.
So Frank, I could actually answer that question for you. It's a little off topic, but it's fine.
Read it because they might not
Frank's question is basically, what's the difference between, and I'm going to go past Alexandrian, but what's the difference between American Alexandrians and British Alexandrians? Well, in truth, one lives in America and one lives in Britain. That's the first simple answer. Now, what you have here is that when the traditions were first brought to America, in the 70s, we'll give it the 70s, right? Whether you were Gardnerian or Alexandrian, there was a lot of lack of training because everyone basically went over to Britain, and this goes for Gardnerians and Alexandrians, like Raymond Buckland and a lot of the ones that we have here for the Alexandrians early on. They would go over and get their initiations, get the Book of Shadows, get the minimal training they could, and then they came back to the United States and taught what they were able to learn, often in a short amount of time. Raymond Buckland founded the Gardnerian tradition within America after 13 days of training in Perth, Scotland. That was it. And back then they didn't have the internet. Telephone calls were extremely expensive to the UK, so it wasn't really practical, and it would have been expensive on both sides, a completely different system than it is now. And traveling was much more, everything was less accessible. So you had sincere people that came over here, and then as generations went on, it didn't improve. Now, what you have now, however, is travel is a lot more accessible. And there is the internet, and phone calls aren't as expensive. And for instance, me and my teacher Skype all the time. It's like we're able to sit there and have a conversation and look at each other, and that changes the situation greatly. Obviously, we've both been fortunate to travel a lot. I've been to the UK many times, and she's been to New Orleans many times. We went to Egypt with each other. We went to Greece with each other. We went to Portugal with each other. This is a different situation than they used to have, right? So now I think that it really just depends on what line. So it depends on what line. I think you just have to ask the questions. I will say that the traditions formed, I'm looking at this again, the traditions formed in the UK, so all of the really good training originally was only in the UK, okay? So that just happens to be the truth. So if you've got lines that haven't reestablished connections with the UK, they probably are missing information.
I think he's asking about, are we more, like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, but if you're saying, like, when it comes to incorporating occult or New Age practices, like,
I didn't read the whole thing.
Are they more occulty or New Age? Are we more occulty or New Age in America?
If I was going to give any shade to some American Gardnerian lines, or some American Alexandrian lines, the only shade I'd give to some American Alexandrian lines is they've chased the tail of some American Gardnerian lines, who also got bad training. So I do think the early BTW movements in the United States were and it's not to knock it. It's, to be honest, I'm American. They didn't have the opportunities that their UK brother and sisters had. They do now. So now I think that it's different. Any Gardnerian or Alexandrian could get guidance from the UK now. Okay. So that's just the way that it is. So if they choose not to, now I don't feel sorry for them. But back then, that's all they had, and I think it was a natural idea that the Alexandrians here, who didn't have any direction, they might meet Gardnerians and get direction from them. Little did they know it was the blind leading the blind. The way that American Gardnerian craft evolved here in its training surrounds certain individuals that were Americans, several generations in from Raymond Buckland. Buckland has spoken about this publicly, so it's not me throwing any shade. His last interview, he threw it all out, all the tea. So the reality of it is, if you're looking at any of the Olwen lines, they are very far removed and different from the UK versions. They just are. I know it for a fact. Now, that doesn't mean some of those Owen lines haven't reestablished connections and made corrections, but the ego of some lineages is that they're doing it right and it's their right way, or they may just choose not to change. So it's a question that you have to ask. But I think some early Alexandrians were influenced by them. And I think that the real crux there is that the funny thing is that Alexandrian witchcraft was going on before American Gardnerian witchcraft. So it's probably why it has more in common with UK Gardnerians than it does American Alexandrians sometimes. There we go. Our lineage, if you wanted to ask about that, as far as the occult side, this is just going to vary from coven to coven.
Yes.
So originally speaking, Alex Sanders, in the way that he promoted his brand of witchcraft, the occult was welcomed. And so a lot of, early Alexandrian covens would also studied the occult. They didn't necessarily consider it craft, but it was studied. And so the covens would work planetary magic from the Key of Solomon, or work angelics, or study the Kabbalah. It wasn't required. So it's a part of our culture. That's not really as true in the Gardnerian. I'm not saying it doesn't occur, but it depends on lineage. So the craft doesn't need any of these things. You could study just the craft in Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft, and some lines do that. Some lines might be exposed to the occult side and then go on and just not be interested in that, and that's totally fine. So it really differs. But as far as the culture of Alexandrian witchcraft, as I was saying earlier, most Alexandrians will call themselves a witch and an occultist. That's not necessarily a part of Gardnerian culture. However, each coven is different. And I don't know every coven in the universe, right? So
yeah.
There we go.
And I think Brian is saying it's for every coven, and that's very true. I will say, though, I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody who is deep within their initiation into an initiatory line of witchcraft who's not also looking into some form of traditional occult practice. Mm-hmm. I think I've yet to meet people who don't. Whether it's Kabbalah, planetary magic, angelics, herbalism, the grimoires, like you're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody that's not. Also, sorry, there's some really weird comments going on about S&M because of the scourge and witchcraft.
I took that, well, those aren't comments you probably shouldn't address.
Yeah, that's why I'm not.
Those, if you're not actually initiated into the craft, you don't know what you're talking about or understand what
about
that
the scourge,
means, other than pictures you've seen. However, I'll say, it's not the only tradition. The Rosicrucians and other magical orders use such implements as well.
Flails and scourges,
It certainly isn't for everyone. But it's not S&M, so there you go. Nobody needs the occult or witchcraft for some good old S&M, right?
But like the occult, honestly, like I just don't meet a lot of people in initiatory craft, and by many I mean I've never met anyone who doesn't also get interested in that. And our philosophies, which even in our materials, in our higher materials, they are rooted in occult Neoplatonic teaching.
Yeah,
that we're very rooted in that.
All of the early Gardnerian elders were definitely occultists, and there's no doubt about that. You can read it. I mean, in the works of Patricia Crowther, Dorian Valente, and
Gerald.
It just wasn't promoted as a part of the culture, like in the verbiage, or the way they would speak. And I think that may have been a little bit of a mistake. I mean, maybe it's the American translation too. Maybe I'm just feeding into that. I don't know. I do know some UK Gardnerians, absolutely, but not as many as Alexandrians. And so I get exposed to a lot of American Gardnerians. In America, it seems like the American lines, they're like, I'm Wicca, I'm pagan. They're really big on that, and it's different. It's a different verbiage, it's a different culture. Where I go and see my elders in the UK, and they'll say, I'm not a pagan.
Yeah, because also what Americans are not understanding is in the early days of the British movements,
pagan wasn't used.
No, and then when it was
Doreen introduced that, and it was way after she was not
even
working craft.
And then when paganism did become a very big thing, it was a very different practice than what was going on in Alexandrian and Gardnerian covens. It was not the same thing. So it was not just about semantics. It wasn't about words necessarily. It was literally about people and the groups they were in.
What's also happening that is probably hard for everyone to digest, including myself, is that when it comes to the power of commercialism, no country has that power like America, right? So when anything is commercialized, America will dominate it. And I'm starting to see a very strong influence between with American ideas actually hitting the UK. There are people in the UK who don't know anything about Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft, but they follow Laurie Cabot or something else, or they're pagan, or they're a hedge witch. These are American ideas. And it's really funny to me when I'll run into someone who's like, well, this witch is from Cornwall. And then I'll look at their work and I'm like, this is American influence on a witch who happens to live in Cornwall.
Yeah.
It's not actually some old Cornwall thing. It's just somebody who's grabbing American ideas and like, sounds cool because they're actually there. There's a woman who does YouTube videos on Irish witchcraft. Her videos on witchcraft from my periphery are not good. However, her knowledge of Irish mythology is good. And because she's Irish and she speaks with an Irish accent, it really makes her seem believable to anyone who doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But she's taking one set of ideas and trying to graft them onto another set of ideas that don't actually have anything to do with each other.
So I wanted to go back to Derek. Derek had a question. He said he's a Freemason. Is familiar with Golden Dawn workings. There's not a Golden Dawn lodge nearby, but he says, interested in witchcraft and our lineage in particular. Could you recommend a book? Yes, I can. It's called Initiation into Witchcraft, written by Brian Cain. It's available at hexwitch.com. It's also available on Amazon. Audiobook, hardback, softcover, mini versions of it. But so Brian himself has written a book, and it's a wonderful introduction to initiatory craft. So I would recommend that one. And then your final question, how do you feel about the OTO? I like the OTO. I'm not a member. There's an active one here. The OTO is not a religion, though. The OTO is a Masonic order, actually. It is it's the Masonic order, and then there's the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, which is the church of the organization. And then there's the Lima is the religion itself, and there's the AA, which is the higher order. So, yeah.
Who is Christian asking?
Christian, who are you asking?
And he's doing it again. Who is this?
I don't know. Is it a comment that we don't have?
I don't know. Okay, so the OTO. Well, I mean, I do make mention of the OTO in my book. I do think there's Gerald Gardner was a member of the OTO. We can go on and on and on about how involved he really was or what myths surround that, but the fact is he was, at least in name, a member of the OTO. Patricia Crowther's craft name publicly, I think she had another one at one point in time, was Thelema, right? That was actually her craft name, Lady Thelema, or just Thelema. They don't say lady, really. My American creeped in there. We don't use that, but, went on to it. I think it's because people call Monique Wilson Lady Olwen. She might have started that, for all I know.
Maybe.
Patricia Crowther, so... she knew Aleister Crowley, so did her husband. I think, the OTO, technically speaking, isn't a religion, though I haven't met a member of the OTO who's not also Thelema. Usually it seems to have a crossover there. But I think that the reason why is because the order actually predates Thelema, so there was no way for them to completely marry that. They couldn't completely marry it. I don't know her name. It's not who you're thinking of. It's not anyone would know. It's just a random woman. She's not an author or anything, as far as I know. But anyway, if we do know her, I don't know. I just ran into her. I had no idea who she was. She wasn't that important to me. But anyway, it was just, I noticed what she was saying about witchcraft wasn't accurate on the subject of witchcraft. But anyway, so the OTO to me is fascinating because in a lot of ways it has some things in common with the witch cult. And in fact, there's this whole mythos about how Gerald Gardner was the feminine Minerval version of that, or witchcraft was. And like I said earlier, there were members of the Golden Dawn who were like aspiring to this female version. And, there's myths of it. In other words, it certainly was coming out in the ethers. I do think that as an occult lodge, in a sense, witchcraft is the feminine version. However, we're also a full-on religion, so it is one of those things. I do think in a very real way, we are a reincarnation of the cult of Isis, not the only one, meaning that I think there have been predecessors to that, and there have been other things. So, it's that's a whole different subject, but in practice and belief, it's very similar. So I can't knock it. I think it's not my cup of tea. I do love occultists. I love magicians because I'm fascinated with the work, but it's a bit too misogynistic for me. So, And
it's funny because it's such a touchy subject because I do have friends who are Thelemites.
It's not anything I'm against, but it's like, okay, real quick though.
Yeah.
Just before I hand it off to Levi, because I know where he's running with the baton, and I didn't interrupt him. He interrupted me. Thank you very much. I was still going. So, the thing is that I don't believe in animal sacrifice. If I believed in animal sacrifice, I would do animal sacrifice. Likewise, I don't fully believe in what the OTO believes in. That's why I'm not in it. I believe in witchcraft. That's why that's what I do. So it's not attacking someone else. It's not my cup of tea. Go ahead.
No, I agree. It's a very touchy subject. Because I have a lot of friends who are Thelemites, and they get very offended when you say that Crowley or that the OTO or Thelema or anything is misogynistic. They hate that. They're like, it's so untrue. You're just a stodgy old whatever, right? And okay, that's fine. I get it. You worship Babylon. There's lots of very powerful women in the history of the OTO. That's great. Marjorie Cameron, whatever, was really into it. I can only speak from experience. I have met many Thelemites from many different cities all over this country. I've communicated with them digitally in person. There is a lot of misogyny, and they might not see as misogyny. They would transform it into sex-positive feminism. It's not. It's literally every woman is my Babylon and the great whore. If you think that that is liberatory, fine. I don't. And I don't think it is as liberatory as they believe it is.
But there are some things that they have in common with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially...
At least they have women.
Especially the church, though. Especially the ecclesia.
They have women who can have positions of authority at something.
Yes, you can be a bishop in the ecclesia.
A lot less misogynistic than the church.
Oh, God, yes. And we have a lot in common with the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, like a lot. Like, I mean, literally some of the same liturgy. So, like, I like the Ecclesia. I do. And I like Crowley. He's not my cup of tea when it comes to some things. I can't
say that I don't like, or that I like Crowley. Based on what I know about him.
I like his poetry. If
I met him when he was older, I probably wouldn't have liked him. If I met him when he was younger, I might have slept with
him. Okay.
Just being honest.
I would have banged him.
Probably.
That's vulgar, I'm sorry.
Because when he got older, he got really creepy, you know. So
maybe he always
not only how he looked, but, you know. And he was all into drugs and stuff like that. When he was younger, he was more of the occultist. And
I love what Elohim just says. He says, Brian, always going on about how you don't believe in animal sacrifice, but you never say nothing about human sacrifice. I do want to say one thing about the three, because we started the show out talking about three things, three terms that often bleed back and forth. Witchcraft, the occult, and the New Age. I firmly believe that one of the greatest things witchcraft did for the Western world's spiritual seekers, and I'm using the word spiritual correctly here, like people who aren't there yet, who aren't religious yet, but could be, is we brought back the goddess. You don't have to do that in the occult. The occult is full of male angel names, male god names, male histories, male written books, et cetera, et cetera. The New Age is sort of androgynous sometimes and has forgotten its call to liberate women from patriarchy. Like, witchcraft really did put the concept of Mother Earth, the Gaia hypothesis, the goddess, back on the stage in the Western world. Yeah. It was consciousness raising. Yeah. It really was goddess consciousness. You know, and we can easily roll off powerful women in our religion. And there's a lot of occultists who can't do that. They have to strain to think of one. And for us, they would roll off the tongue. Yeah. Lois Bourne, Patricia Crowther, Maxine Sanders, like
Val Hughes.
You know, I mean, it would be too easy. You know,
I mean, absolutely. You know, I mean, one of the things I will agree with Crowley is that every man and woman is a star. You know, within the craft, women have the same potential as men to lead. Doesn't mean they all do or can, but they have the same potential. With the OTO, there's, you know, and I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing too much because I don't know everything about the OTO. But I think there are certain expectations in the OTO that would not be in the craft.
Agreed. I agree with that.
As far as performance goes.
Yeah, agreed.
And you could just read between the lines there if you want.
You know, and I think we have a different definition of freedom.
Yes.
And liberty. You know, I do think that people forget that Crowley's philosophy is deeply political, deeply anarchic.
Is it
even though he was a fucking Tory?
Jack Braceland? Am I saying it right? The guy who ran the OTO in California. They just made the show about him, which was really good.
Wait,
no. Jack Braceland?
No.
Jack Parsons.
Jack Parsons.
Jack Parsons wrote some wonderful poetry, and he did express the idea that what he was doing was tied to witchcraft. And in fact, had correspondences with Gerald Gardner, who was also in the OTO, who had already begun the witchcraft revival. So there is a crossover in a sense, you know, and there is a crossover between the two movements, in the fact that, you know, the OTO does have priests and priestesses, and they do work magic together. So there are some similarities. However, I do look at the OTO as being way more solar, whereas the craft is more lunar. And I'm not saying that that we are a matriarchy and that they are the patriarchy, but I think that they are closer to the church than we are. That's my way of looking at it, anyway. In a sense, they're more like trying to thumb their nose at the church, Whereas I think that we've evolved to be just completely separately independent. And does that make sense? Like,
yes,
going anywhere
they're trying
that?
to reform the concept of the...
Yes.
And also, it's important to remember that Crowley's playing with things a lot.
Yes.
There's a lot of sarcasm in it. There's a lot of like intelligent wit in a lot of what he did. But people have forgotten that and they take it way too seriously now. And the thing is also... He wasn't. A lot of OTO people I know are like full-blown anarchists now, which is funny because he wasn't. He could be deeply conservative at times, even though he was out banging everybody in existence. He actually had some deeply conservative views about good old England and whatnot. That's another dirty little secret, which I hate to say it. Gardner was too, but like it was a different time. So was Doreen. Doreen one time was a member of the BNP. She did resign and write a letter, which I'm very happy to say she did do that. But
I'm sorry, one more time.
Doreen.
Linte?
Yeah.
The B in what?
The BNP. It's a fascist party in England.
Oh, I don't know anything about it.
But she did resign and write a letter explaining why and whatnot, which is good. But yeah, there's always those weird vibes that
you do
happen.
sound like you've got some kind of weird sickness going on, allergies or something.
Why? I'm not.
Patrick.
I'm not ill, I promise. It's me knocking on wood.
He's very nasally.
Maybe it's just my voice. Now I
feel like phlegm's oozing out of you.
Ew, you're getting gross. You're getting gross. You're getting gross. We're losing it, people.
This would be the time I would get it, when Christian's fully vaccinated.
The gods would spite you.
That's when I would be like, I have coronavirus. Yeah. Anyway. So we are nearing the end of the show. We've got 15 minutes. So we've got time for one more caller. If you'd like to call and ask any questions about tonight's subject or anything to do with Alexandrian witchcraft or witchcraft in general, the number is 504-321-3472. Next week, we are going to do the entire show on astrology through the lens of Alexandrian witchcraft, promoting Levi Rowland's new book, the second book published by Warlocks Press, The Art Cosmic. So
I do like my title.
Exciting.
I do feel good about my title.
And it is available at hexwitch.com for pre-order now, and you get to see the nice cover. I wish we had a copy to show you here now. Maybe it'll be here by the show. Last time, Christian, by the time mine was pre-ordered, we did have a sample copy.
What do they call it? A gallery copy? I can't remember. Or a galley copy?
There's one on the way, maybe. But it is what it is. Maybe you could always print out a picture of it.
This is the Art Cosmic. Yeah. But no, it's about traditional astrology too. That's very important. It's a very different kind of astrology, which we'll delve into the next time that when we talk about it.
I'm not by any means the expert that Levi is on the subject, but we do share that love of traditional astrology in our magics.
Yeah, traditional planetary magic is much more rewarding for me. I'm not judging anybody who likes it.
It's the only thing I connect with. I don't really, I don't do charts or anything like that. I do planetary magic. That's what I do.
I do lots of charts. Yeah. But it's I do like it a little bit better.
My brother was the astrologer.
Warlock Press. What
did I say?
I don't know. You must have not said Warlock.
I must have said Warlocks Inc. Warlocks Press. Sorry.
Yeah. But you can please follow Warlock Press on Facebook and all the social medias. And Lilith Dorsey's book will not be far behind either. An incredible re-release of one of her books. I've seen some of the work going into that. It's incredible. Love it. Christian's as well. The re-release of Christian's book, The Witch's Book of the Dead.
A lot of books coming out this year.
Yes. Just one Warlock, not two. Let's say. Thank you so much to people pre-ordering. I love that. Thank you so much to all the people pre-ordering. I really hope you enjoyed it. Put a lot of love and heart and magic into it. What do we want to end on?
Well, it was...
I took it away for a little self-promotion.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to end on.
Thank you.
Usually I say, what's next week's show going to be? I've got some ideas. We do take your guys' ideas for shows, but I want people to understand that the entire vision of Covendom was that this was a show, it was the first show that I know of that was from a BTW perspective. It's funny because now there are some other ones coming up, which is fine. I think it was needed. We've got all these other people out there representing it. I think it's needed. In fact, I almost sent you one. Somebody started one in Australia where it's two gay male Alexandrians. And I'm like, it's literally like a ripoff of our show.
No, they didn't.
Yes, it is. I don't mind, by the way.
Alexandrian?
Well, it says it Alexandros. So like I can't read it all. You might be able to read it. I'll see if I can find it.
Oh, good.
Now it's fine because it's completely in a different. It's in Portuguese or something else, you know. But I just thought it was funny because it was very much like our show, except they're younger than us.
Are you trying to say I'm gay? I find that very rude.
And you can tell which one's me and which one's Levi. It's a funny thing. You know?
Now I have to see.
It's like they modeled it after us.
Now I have to see.
I wish I could just find it now.
No, we're not doing this on air.
I don't know if I'd be able to find it now because I can't think of the guy who did
The New Age.
And I don't want to offend anyone by saying they're copying us, but if you weren't copying us, it just looks like
yes. And Christian, I'm so sorry. I keep putting an S on it. It is Warlock Press, right?
Don't make fun of his lisp. It's
Maybe
really
it's my issue, right? It's Warlock Press, and please follow it on social media. You'll find all the amazing things. What are you doing?
Just show you what goes.
Why? Brian, we've lost the thread of this conversation and this whole...
All the things you could see. Anyway, so I think we'll just call that an adieu for this evening if there's no other calls. So sorry about the internet problem. So I would leave it with this. The witchcraft has roots in the occult, but it's its own separate thing. And... the New Age has roots in the occult, but it's its own separate thing. You know, they've evolved separately, and one of them turned out really well, and the other one didn't. And you know, but I think that there's all these crossovers. The general person who comes into any of these things, they don't know the difference. You know, what are you taught in school? You know, you're taught a witch is a Halloween thing. You know, and that's a part of our culture that people don't. You know, I think it really bothers people, and I don't care because it shouldn't. I think it really bothers people when I point out that witch is an English word, but people need to really just think about that, and they need to think about why English is the dominant language. Why is it that everyone in Japan is required to learn English, but everyone in America or the UK is not necessarily required to learn Japanese? Because the business world works off of English. So when you're like, this means cook, this means witch, this means secretary, you're translating someone else's language into yours, and you're making your platform the thing. That's not actually how it works. You know, it only works that way because of British colonialism. So when you had a bunch of men in the 1930s running around saying that guy in a tiki hut is a witch, what that person's doing is a witch. If you worship the devil, you're a witch. It all got mixed up. You know, so people are still going off of that. And I find it mildly disturbing that they are, but that's the case, right? And it is what it is. It's a part of our culture. You know, but even when I was growing up as a kid, people didn't use witchcraft to describe magic. Witchcraft was always something separate. And the funny thing is, it's still done that. Even the people who are saying they're lighting candles, when they're saying a witch, they don't want to say they're just doing magic. They want to identify with some part of the archetype. You know, they want to be special. They want their power to be theirs. You know, it's a fantasy. You know, it's not really going off of anything else. So... I don't know. Make more sense.
I'm going to end on this. Witchcraft is a religion. The goddess is real. She'll recognize her own. Soul Cycle and a rose quartz is not a religion.
No. But it's not bad. I've got crystals.
That's all I got.
And I've got people that use crystals.
Crystals are lovely.
Who are cool.
Soul Cycle's not a religion.
Find this now.
Organic food is not a religion. Bye, everybody. Bye. Kidding. I will see you next time. I can't wait to talk about my book. Thank you all those who left us all the great comments, and it is a pleasure. We will see you next time.